This table helps us understand the New Zealand curriculum levels in relation to reading, writing, and maths from years 1 to 7. So for reading, it links the colour wheel to the different year levels and curriculum levels. It also relates the curriculum levels for writing to the different year levels as well. And for maths, which we'll focus on today, it relates it to the numeracy stages 1 to 8. So looking specifically at maths, this document is taken from the New Zealand Maths website, and it gives an outline of what the stages 0 through to 8 in maths look like in relation to how children would solve maths problems. So focusing on maths, we're going to draw right down to what maths development looks like in years 1. So that's from stages 0 up to stage 3. So this table shows that by the end of year 1, when a child has completed a full year of school, they are expected to be at stages 2 to 3 on the numeracy stages scale. So that means that they're expected to start at stage 0 and work their way through the stages to stages 2 to 3 by the end of 1 year of school. So when children first come to school, they're coming in as stage 0. And stage 0 is looking at where children aren't quite sure yet how to count a group of objects, even as small as a group of objects of 5. Then the children develop their knowledge of numbers, first of all, to help them to move on from stage 0 to stage 1. So that's when they can begin to start to read numbers to 10, and they can count forwards to 10, count backwards from 10, and they can move on to reading a number after 10, after a number to 10. So, for example, what number comes after the number 4? That would be the number 5. Then they can move on to knowing what number becomes before a number to 10. So, what number becomes before the number 8? That would be 7. Further to that, they know patterns to 5, so they'd see a dice and they'd know when they roll a dice and see that a 3 shows up, they can say it's a 3 straight away. They don't need to count each dot. Also, they can put numbers in order to 10, so they might have a random number of numbers from 1 to 10, say the numbers 2, 3, 7, and 1, and they can rearrange those so that they go in order from smallest to biggest or biggest to smallest. So that's the knowledge side of things, and then moving on to strategy and how to actually solve problems. They then know how to count up to 10 to solve problems, such as if I have 3 lollies from my mum and 1 lolly from my dad, then I can get 3 counters first of all, and then 1 more counter, and I can count all of those to find out how many I've got all together, counting 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it is a tremendous amount of learning when you break it down like that, to move from stage 0, where you don't know a lot about numbers and about counting, to then moving on to knowing about numbers from 1 to 10, and then being able to count a group of objects to then find out how to add together numbers to 10, like 2 plus 3 or 4 plus 1. It's helpful too to look at each of those lines in that poster and drill down to what it actually looks like in a visual way. So here we're going through each different step and what it looks like. And you might even focus on one of these goals once a day or for a whole week. And an important thing too is to constantly go back to these and practice and revise so that it becomes automatic, and then they're ready to move on to the next stage. So here we are now at stage 2, and it's easy to see that once you understand what stage 1 looks like, stage 2 becomes a lot easier to understand, because it's really a lot of what stage 1 looks like, but moving up to numbers 1 through to 20. Another important difference now between stage 1 and 2 is that the children are now expected to be able to confidently subtract as well. So that's where they are not just adding groups of objects together, but they can get a group of objects and then take away from that group using materials and see how much is left once they've taken away from that group. So once the children are confident in stage 2, then they're ready to move on to stage 3, and that's where it moves from counting with materials to being able to count in your head. So the proper term for counting in your head in maths is called imaging. Another important difference with stage 2 and stage 3 is that you'll notice that the children are now expected to start thinking about multiplication. So that's where they are still counting to solve multiplication problems, but they're starting to think about several groups of objects and how they might solve that. So they might have, say, 4 groups of 3 items in each group, and they can then start to count each of those groups in their heads, or still with materials at the beginning of this stage, to be able to solve that there are 3 in that group and then 3 more in the next group. So that's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they've got 6 so far, and then there's still 3 more in the next group. So that's 7, 8, 9. And then in the final 4th group, there's 3. So that's counting from 9. There's 10, 11, 12 in that group. Another step forward that they're taking with stage 3 is that they're starting to think about ratio and proportions, which might be more familiarly known as fractions. So there's no reason why the children couldn't start to recognise and learn about fractions earlier on in their schooling. So for example, when they're classified as stage 0, stage 1 or stage 2, it's just put here in stage 3 because this is where they should be confident and fluent in knowing about fractions or ratio and proportions. So this is when they can find a group of objects and find half of that group of objects or a quarter of that group of objects. And they can also look at a whole object, a picture of an object, and be able to break that into half or into quarters as well. For example, a pizza or a cake or a chocolate bar. So that's a very quick overview of the New Zealand curriculum levels, drilling right down to maths in the first year of school. And it covers all the way from stages 0 through to stage 1, 2 and 3. It might be helpful to now look at some of the maths problems that are provided on our Birkdale Learning site and try and match up how they relate to the different stages and what different learning goals the maths problem is covering within those stages. So thank you for watching and happy learning.